All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Giovanna James. I am the lead counselor here at Plano Senior High School. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the process of enrolling in a dual credit class through our partnership with Collin College. I've got with me tonight Crystal Sanders Pierce. She is our representative that works with us throughout the process of getting all of our kids set up for dual credit. She's got quite a bit of information to share with you tonight. And as there are over 100 of us in the session tonight, I'm going to ask that if you have questions, that you put them in the chat. I will be watching the chat while Ms. Sanders Pierce is doing the presentation. I'll also ask that you keep your microphones muted so that everyone can hear what she is saying as she goes over the information. We will monitor the questions in the chat, and if for whatever reason we do not get to your question or you still have additional questions at the end of our time together, I encourage you to reach out to us. We'll provide our contact information, and you can always reach out to your counselor at your high school. He or she is also going to be able to help answer questions that you might have about dual credit. All right, so I am going to turn it over to Crystal and let her take it from here.
Thank you so much, Ms. James. I really appreciate it. And good evening to each of you. I am very excited to be here tonight to share a little bit about dual credit and the process of dual credit, what dual credit is, and just how your student could benefit from taking dual credit classes. So we'll just go ahead and dive on in to what is dual credit. Now, dual credit is simply a college course that students can take where they are earning both simultaneously high school credit and college credit at the same time. Sometimes, it's a no-brainer for some students, but for some students that may or may not be a good fit for them. We will dive into that a little bit here in the presentation, just talking about expectations as it pertains to dual credit. It is for any student that is able to take dual credit, I feel that it is a phenomenal opportunity for students to get ahead, as well as parents to save a few dollars for students who are headed to college. So let's see here. Let's talk about just some of the benefits of dual credit. So when we look at the benefits of a dual credit student, now the courses, they count not only toward high school credit, but it also counts toward college credit. Now, and I wish that this resource was available to me as a high school student, because again, for any student that's headed to college, they're going to have to take their freshman level English, freshman level history, those types of classes. And so we actually offer those classes for students to just kind of go ahead and knock those on out while they are earning their high school credit at the same time. Now, our classes are typically smaller in size because, of course, if you go to a university, consider A&M or any of the other universities, of course, those lectures, those classes are much larger in size. And so dual credit has the benefit of smaller class sizes. Now, there is educational support available from Collin. And again, I'll talk about a few of those resources that we have available to our dual credit students once they have began the process of becoming a Collin student. Now, instructors are also available for students at their disposal to assist and aid in any way that they can. We are absolutely here to make sure that our students are successful. I can't say that enough. Like, we really want to make sure that they succeed. And so as a result, we make sure that we have resources in place for our students to do just that. Now, again, students are able to experience the college environment and they're able to kind of get a feel for the rigor of the college courses. Now, just because these are, just because a student is a high school student, if they're going to take dual credit, at that point, they are opting to also consider the rigor of a college level course. So I just want to say that the courses are not watered down just because they are in high school. That's really not how it works. We have Collin professors that teach our courses, and typically that rigor is the same. So I just want to kind of note that. Now, this is also the beginning of their college transcript. So it is very important for students to have the maturity level and the mindset that's necessary for a student considering taking college level classes. It's certainly not anything to play with, especially when we know that our students are going to matriculate out to other colleges and universities. This will be the start of that transcript, and they will look at that. The student will have their high school transcript, but then when it's time for them to go to college or transfer out to a different university, they will have to submit to that university their Collin transcript as well. So it's very important that they are very focused and basically education minded when they're taking those dual credit classes. Now, the degree completion is basically, for some students, you would be surprised the way that they are able to take advantage of those dual credit classes. I had a student that I worked with from 10th grade all the way up until she graduated last year. And in 2021, and she graduated high school in May, and she graduated from Collin with her associate's degree in December. She was able to take advantage of all of those dual credit classes and resources that were available to her. And she was very successful in that endeavor. There's also a cost savings factor that we'll talk about a little bit later, and I'll just show you guys how the cost is significantly cheaper to take a dual credit class versus the student waiting to go to the university to take those classes. Okay. So students could save a significant amount of money by taking dual credit classes. Again, we do know that dual credit is not necessarily a good fit for everybody, but for the students that could really truly benefit from taking a dual credit class, they will save a significant amount of money. Collin College's dual credit courses are roughly about $173. This is the exact same course that a student would take at the University of Texas at Dallas for roughly almost $3,000 for a 3 credit hour course. For UNT, that same course will cost roughly $1,400 for the student, give or take fees associated with taking that class. And so again, just to put in perspective here, for students who are in Collin County and they're interested in taking dual credit classes, they can literally take the exact same class that's going to transfer out to a Texas state institution for just a fraction of that price. Okay. So for dual credit courses, they are transferable to most 4-year colleges and universities in Texas. Now, students are responsible, and this is the disclaimer here, students are responsible for determining whether or not those classes will transfer. We typically encourage students to reach out to the institutions that they are considering attending once they graduate from high school, just to see if those institutions accept those dual credit classes. Now, again, most of our state schools here in Texas, it's a no-brainer. Those dual credit classes are accepted, but for classes for colleges that are out of state or any private institutions, you certainly want to make sure that you do your due diligence and reach out to their admissions department to ask those questions in terms of whether or not dual credit is or is not accepted there. So that's very important to know. Okay. Now let's dive on into what dual credit is and whether or not it's a good fit. So is dual credit right for you? Now for dual credit, let's see here. Go to the Ms. James, will you go to the next slide? Okay, so is dual credit right for you? So now for students who are trying to figure out, whether or not it's a good fit, or parents just trying to kind of assess where their student are in terms of whether or not dual credit will be a good fit for the student, I always encourage students to ask themselves in terms of time management, is it, what are your time management skills looking like? I mean, many of our students, they have extracurricular activities. We have students that are in band. We have students who have jobs or other responsibilities. And so they have to make sure that that time time management component is there because that is going to be critical to their success. Also, does the student have the maturity level and the mindset that's needed for some of those courses? And then we certainly want to encourage students to get to know their professor, get to know the professor's syllabus, and make sure that you're asking the questions that are necessary. Again, college credits and college classes are totally different from the high school side of things. And so whereas you may have a high school teacher say, well, we have a test coming up this Friday, it could be where you may have a test coming up on Friday for dual credit and the professor has not said anything, and you'll get in the class and it's clear your desk and you're like, well, why, what is going on? But you didn't, if you have not read your syllabus, then you'll know that, hey, there was an exam today. So it's very important that students, again, do their due diligence and make sure that they are reading their syllabus, they're asking questions, they are attending class, and they are making sure that they are prepared for class, using those resources that they need to prepare for class. Okay. And so for the FERPA law, we'll talk about the FERPA law. So now with FERPA, it's actually the other slide, if you want to go back a little bit. So for the FERPA law is very similar to the HIPAA law, whereby parents, now that the student is beginning their college classes, it's a little bit different from the high school side of things where you could simply reach out to the guidance counselor or the teacher and ask any question that you have as it pertains to your student. It's a little different for college because the FERPA law that's in place states that we typically cannot share those grades, the course schedule, test scores, and things like that with parents. It's similar, very well, as far as like any student that has any issues and parents are wanting to reach out to those professors, I'll just say that there is a waiver in your student's CougarWeb account where you could sign that waiver and it may give you the option to be able to speak about certain things as it pertains to your student. But if that waiver is not signed, unfortunately, professors are not allowed by law to speak with you. Same for sharing those grades, course schedules. There was an instance where whereby there was a parent looking for their kid had not come home, and this was not a dual credit student, this was just a regular college student. And unfortunately, the on-campus police department could not share that information because, again, that FERPA law is in place. And so if you guys would like to go in there and sign that waiver, you can absolutely feel free to do so. You're more than welcome to do that. And in fact, it's encouraged.
Crystal, we have just a couple people who are wanting me to go back a slide. Okay. I think it's the slide that covers is dual credit right for you.
Yes. Okay.
I know we've got, we probably have some that are trying to decide even if this
okay.
is going to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So is dual credit right for you? Again, we spoke about that time management element and the importance of attending class and just preparing for classes, utilizing your resources wisely, making sure that you have the maturity level and the mindset needed for a college student. We have some students that are just advanced in terms of academics and mindset. And for those students, typically they're able to identify whether or not they are a good fit for dual credit. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's important that the student gets to know their core syllabus, study that syllabus and know and have those dates handy in terms of important deadlines. I cannot stress enough the importance of adhering to pivotal deadlines, no matter what capacity. In this case, we're talking about grades and assignments and tests that may come about, but in any capacity, you want to make sure that you're adhering to the deadlines. As far as your instructor is concerned, you want to try to establish rapport with your instructor, ask questions. When they see that you're engaged, they see that you're trying, then typically they'll try to help you guys, and if they see that you're putting forth the effort. Now, when it comes to drop and withdrawal deadlines, that's very important. Sometimes there are students that may get in the first week and they'll say, okay, well, I've decided that, I won't continue on with dual credit. It may not necessarily be the best fit. You want to make sure that you have those, that you honor those deadlines, because Collin honors their deadlines. Same for the drop dates. Now, a drop is when the student drops the class before the class begins. Okay, so as of right now, we are beginning the registration process for the classes, but the classes do not actually start until the fall when we return from the summer. So typically our college classes, they start 2 weeks after the high school classes begin. And so as long as students they could drop a day before the Collin classes begin, and they will be fine. That would be a drop off of their record. It would be as though the class never existed because they never attended the class. The student would be eligible for a 100% refund back to their original payment method. However, if they do not drop that class until after the class begins, it is now considered what we call a withdrawal. A withdrawal is totally different. That W will go on the student's transcript, unfortunately, even if they they're withdrawing from the class. It's the same process that they would have had if they would have dropped it before the class. But the difference here is that not only will they receive a W on their college transcript that they withdrew from the class, and the W does not really count towards students that much unless they receive excessive Ws going as they move forward through their college career. Now, with the withdrawal, I also want to note that there is no guarantee of a refund, because the refunds are totally before the classes begin. Once the classes begin, then there is no refund. The first day, a student may get back a percentage of that refund, but typically after the second or third day, there is no refund for a withdrawal from a class. So even if you totally forgot, your dog chewed your phone cord and you couldn't call us, or for whatever reason you couldn't email, whatever the case is, unfortunately, Collin honors those deadlines, okay? Now, the student code of conduct is very critical in terms of, we have students whereby, on the high school side of things, the teachers may be a little more lenient in terms of your assignments and how you submit your assignments, but on the college side, professors, they utilize certain platforms very resourcefully. And so basically, I'll just give an example. If a student has plagiarized a complete paper, now on the high school side, the teacher may give it back to the student, may have a sit down with mom and dad, allow them the opportunity to return in that assignment. Well, on the college side of things, it's totally different. The professor may or may not even ever reach out to the student about the fact that they know that they've plagiarized. They simply send that information directly over to the Dean of Students department. And from there, the Dean of Students in their department staff will determine the next steps for the student, whether that means that they can't take any more classes, or whether or not it's a warning. It totally is, that decision always rests upon the Dean of Students. We don't really have any control over that. So again, this is just very important information as you guys kind of assess whether or not dual credit will be a good fit. I know we talked about the course syllabus recently, and I'll never forget my sister. She took some Collin classes, and I remember one day, I think it was like the first week of class, everyone cleared their desk and she was looking around like, what is everyone doing? And come to find out, they had an exam that day. And she was like, but he didn't say anything. How did you guys know? And they said, well, it was in your syllabus. And she had not read her syllabus. And so that is the importance of reading your syllabus and making sure that you're prepared for your classes, because you just never know. I mean, sometimes the instructors are a little wavering and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have some that are a little hand holding, and then you have some that are just not. Okay.
Thank you, Crystal, for going back. We do have a lot to cover, so I'm gonna keep moving, I think.
Okay. Yes.
Right here.
Yes, yes.
And just as a reminder, we will be posting this on our Plano Senior High Counseling website, so you'll be able to go back and review it at your convenience.
Okay. And so for dual credit eligibility, now, in order to consider, if you're considering dual credit, just know you have to complete the entire admissions process for Collin. So it's literally as though you are applying to Collin as a Collin College student. The only difference is that you are applying as a dual credit student and not an incoming freshman. That's very important to know, because if you go in and you apply and you complete your application as an incoming freshman, sometimes incoming freshmen have holds on their account, which are checklist items that they have to clear off of their account before they can register for their dual credit classes. An example of that is, for instance, dual credit students are not required to complete a mandatory orientation, whereas our freshman students are required to complete that orientation. But if a dual credit student go in there and apply as a freshman, then that hold, that checklist item is going to populate onto the student's account. And unfortunately, it's not a manual process where we could go back and just take it off. The student would have to go through the steps of completing that orientation. So permission must be obtained from the high school counselor every semester before enrollment. Now, luckily for us and for the counselors, I think it's going to really help the process. This time around, we have what's called a permission form, and this permission form will be good for the entire fall and spring semesters. And so they won't have to go back the second semester and necessarily get that permission again to take the dual credit class for the spring. However, they will have to register for their class again in the spring. So we'll talk about how in the fall, they may take one part of a certain class, and then in the spring, then that's when they'll take the next portion of that class. The students must meet the TSI, the College Readiness Standards, which is also called the Texas Success Initiative exam. This is very important to know. The state of Texas requires this exam for all Texas state institutions. So again, they are applying as a college student, and so they must meet the TSI requirements. And so I'll show you all here shortly the exemptions and waivers that we will accept in place of the TSI if a student has already met those waiver requirements or exemption requirements. If they have not, then the student will have to take the actual TSI exam. And the exam it's simply a placement exam. It's not like the SAT or the ACT, but we can accept the SAT or ACT as exemptions for the TSI. But the TSI is simply a placement exam to determine whether or not the student meets the level required to be able to take a college readiness level class. And again, students must meet both the high school and college requirements to continue on. So again, if a student fails a course, a dual credit course, then we have to explore other options for the next semester. So they have to make sure that they're meeting both requirements on both sides. Okay. Now, this slide here just kind of outlines some of the 2022-2023. This is just a sample of the course offerings. We have not yet rolled out our courses for this year yet. It's absolutely forthcoming over the next few weeks or so. What I have here is subject to change, but I just put the sample out here, which was based on the courses that we offered for this year. So these were the courses that we offered for the fall and for the spring. And this is just to kind of give you guys a picture of the courses that we typically tend to offer for dual credit. But again, subject to change, this is simply a sample of our course offerings. As you see, for the fall, I want to note for English 1301, that's the first semester of English that's a freshman level English. If they were to go take this class as a freshman, then they would take English 1301 first. English 1301 is a prerequisite to English 1302, same for history 1301, 1302. So with that being said, if a student decided for whatever reason that they didn't want to do dual credit in the fall, but then they came back and wanted to take it in the spring, they may not necessarily be able to take English 1302 or history 1302 because we only offer the second part of the course the second semester. So if they missed 1301, then they likely wouldn't be able to take 1302. So I just wanted to kind of note that there. Same for a few of our other, these are typically prerequisites. If you look at the fall, you can just kind of gauge how the fall builds toward the spring. So again, those classes are usually prerequisite courses in the fall to the spring courses. So in the spring, students are very limited to the courses that they can take if they did not take a dual credit class in the fall. Okay, again, these are transferable to most public universities. Now, for the process, there are quite a few steps here. The first step is going to be apply to Collin. So for any student considering dual credit, if they are a new student, they must go to apply at apply.collin.edu. You could simply go to the Collin website, so collin.edu, and then once you get to that homepage, you'll just see apply at the top, and you just click on apply, and the student would go in there and apply as a dual credit student. I encourage you all to go ahead and get this process started immediately. The application typically takes 3 to 5 business days to process, but the application, everything else precedes the application. So you have to go ahead and get the application done because you can't do anything if you have not applied to Collin first, okay? Once you have applied to Collin, at that point, you have your checklist items, which we call holds on your account. So once you apply to Collin, then those checklist items will automatically populate onto your account. And so you have to clear all of those checklist items before you can proceed with registering for your class. Now, the permission form that I mentioned earlier, that is one of the checklist items that you have to have in order to take the dual credit classes. You have to have that permission, but it is not registering you for your class. I know that the permission form has the steps where you get the signatures and you also have your courses listed, but that is not the registration for the class. The students have to register in their CougarWeb account, which is their Collin portal that they will receive once they have applied for admissions and once they have received the email from admissions in about 3 to 5 business days. That email will have their login credentials, which would be their username, their password, their Collin ID number, and everything that your student will do from that point on will be done in their CougarWeb account. Once the registration would also take place in the student's CougarWeb account. Once they have registered for their classes, they have to pay for their classes in order to solidify their registration process. The student cannot register for their class and not pay and think that they're okay. They will be dropped from their classes, that the system will automatically roll over and drop the students from their class by the deadline if they do not pay for their classes. So that is so critical. I really can't stress that part enough. I see where students may register themselves and then they'll promise me that they're going to go ahead and take care of their payment. And when they don't, they're dropped from their classes. And so we certainly want to just kind of let you guys know that in order to submit your registration, that is done through payment for your classes. Okay.
Before we go on, I do just want to, first off, want to say I'm getting lots of questions in the chat. I'm answering them as quickly as I can.
Okay.
If I don't answer yours, it's probably because I know she's going to answer it coming up. Yes. Or I just haven't got to it yet. So just be patient. We got a lot of eager dual enrollment families in here. I do want to cover on this screen because you're doing an excellent job, but I want to reiterate that the student is applying to Collin College in order to take a dual enrollment class. So there are steps that have to be completed: application, registration, and payment. If those steps are not completed, just because you told your high school counselor you wanted to take dual credit doesn't mean you'll be in the class. The student must follow the steps. Our dual credit advisors, such as Crystal, are excellent at helping students with the process, but the student does need to be proactive in making sure they're doing everything that they're supposed to do. Yes,
thank you so much for noting that. I'm so glad you mentioned that because to to Ms. James' point, the semester, for instance, I'll give an example. Sometimes I may get students saying, well, hey, my dual credit class was on my high school roster, but I don't see anything in my CougarWeb account. My classes aren't showing up and I don't know what's going on. I'm not on my professor's roster. And I'll say, well, chances are you probably haven't registered. And even for some students, if they've registered, they didn't make that payment. And as a result, they were dropped. So it was almost as though that process was null and void for the student, because the system will drop you from your class if you do not make the payment, and you have to take care of that by the deadline. That is very, very important. Now, I want to say that for students who are dual credit and they have like free or reduced lunch at the high school, those students do receive free tuition if they're considering taking dual credit classes. Now, the caveat there is that the books are not included in that tuition waiver. So once a student, if they have free or reduced lunch, then they would let me know and I will process the waiver on the back end so that they are not dropped from their classes. But I just want to note that that does not include any other fees associated with those classes, nor does it include books. So I just want to be clear there. A lot of times I'll get students who, if they're free or reduced lunch, they may automatically assume that it covers everything, but it does not cover those books, okay? Now, application tips. So once the student go in to complete their application, they want to create an account. So you want to create a Collin account and go in there, make sure that you use the student's personal email address. Now that is very important, because once students graduate from high school, if they've used their high school email address, the high schools do away with those email addresses so many days after the student has graduated. So if they have their ISD email on file, then they may miss very important information if they decide to move on over to Collin beyond dual credit once they graduate. The student must also make sure that they list their social security number on their application. If they do not, they will be flagged and one of those holes will be placed back on their account, and they have to go in there, circle back around and enter that social. Students, make sure that you enter your social. Go ahead and just take care of it and make sure that it's accurate, because if not, then that's a whole nother admissions process. So just go ahead and make sure that you are filling out your application as accurately as possible. Same for the intended academic goal. You want to select yes for dual credit. That's very important. Yes for dual credit. You can select any major as you're applying to Collin. It doesn't matter. We can always go in and change majors, because typically these are our dual credit students many times are undecided at this point, and that's okay. So you could just go in and select any major, and because you're taking general college classes, that would pretty much transfer. So residency and tuition, again, that's decided based on your answers on your application. So I can't stress enough to make sure that your information is as accurate as possible, because I see sometimes where students may not necessarily fill out the right information for residency, and it may code them as out of state. Of course, out of state has way more fees associated with it. And then at that point, we have to go through the residency department, and it takes students providing more documentation, and it's just a lot of work. And so they have to fill out what we call a reclassification form. And so just to circumvent all of those issues that may arise, make sure that you're putting the accurate information. We have some students, sometimes they'll be coded as out of county. It's simply because they may not have put the right information. Now, we do have some dual credit students who are actually out of county. For instance, the other side of Frisco may be considered Denton County or whatever, but we're here in Collin County. And so students, make sure that you're putting the right information so that your residency will be accurate, so that your tuition balance will be accurate, okay? I also listed the Plano Senior High School Code. The other day I was working with a student who plans on heading on over to Collin beyond graduating. And so as we were going through, I decided to just go ahead and include that high school code. So if you guys wanna jot that down, it's TX 5565. So when you go in there to complete your Collin application, that will be the Plano Senior High School Code, okay? And again, once you complete all that information, you all as students will receive your Collin ID number, your Collin email address, your CougarWeb account login credentials, in 3 to 5 business days. All right, so next slide. Okay, so for graduation dates, this is very important also as you are completing your Collin application, make sure that you put the right graduation dates on there. And basically the admissions department has to have this for their purposes, for reporting purposes and auditing purposes. So for instance, for rising seniors, make sure that you select June 2023 as your graduation dates. For rising juniors, June 2024, and for rising sophomores, June 2025. Okay. Now, again, I've already kind of gone through what CougarWeb is. It's simply the Collin portal, that the student portal that every student will have access to once they have completed the Collin admissions application. The students will receive their login credentials, and at that point, they would go to the Collin homepage, and on the right-hand side, they'll see the CougarWeb login. They would go in there, and this portal houses everything that the student will need at that point going forward. This is where they will add their classes. This is where they will drop their classes. This is where they would go in and complete their online trainings. This is also where their Collin email address will be housed. This is where they'll pay their tuition. This is how they will access their Canvas platform. This will be through their CougarWeb account. This is where their courses are housed. And this is also where the instructors will put their information out there. Now, the students are able to check their Collin class schedule through their CougarWeb account, their grades, and anything else that they need to do. It would all be found in their CougarWeb account. Okay. So very important, once the student has received their login credentials and they're able to log into their CougarWeb account, the very first thing that they want to do inside of their CougarWeb is like it auto-populates almost on that first screen. They are able to set up their one login account. The one login is simply a verification account that they would need to set up in order to access their Collin emails. Very important, because once they are now in the Collin system and I have their email addresses, I'll be sending out emails. Hey, I noticed that you haven't completed this hold on your account. You want to go ahead and take care of this before registration opens. I send out those emails. And so sometimes students will say that they didn't receive it because they have not yet set up their one login account. Make that the second step aside from applying. So once you've applied and you've received your credentials, go ahead and get that email set up and your one login account set up so that you'll be good and you won't miss any pivotal information that you would miss otherwise. Okay. So now let's talk about removing all the checklist items, which are also known as holds in your account. Okay. So the next slide. Okay, so as I stated earlier, those holds are simply just those checklist items that prevents registration. All of the holds on your account, all the checklist items must be complete. There's not a single checklist item that you'll be able to kind of get around in order to register. Typically, if students come to me and they say that they've registered, I'm able to go in. If they have a hold on their account, it immediately tells me that they didn't register for their class, because you're not even able to register if you have any holds on your account. Okay. Now for the high school approval, we talked about the permission form that students must fill out, parents must sign, and the counselors will also kind of determine the classes that the students will take. And the students have to get that permission for those classes. In order to do so, they have to have that approval.
I'm going to interject and talk about this for just a moment.
Okay.
So the way that this works is if you put into your course requests, we have been doing course requests for next school year throughout February. So if your student entered that they want to take a dual credit class, then counselors will be reaching out to them and providing these permission forms that she is speaking of. So that's how the counselor is going to know that you wanted to take a dual credit class, because the student indicated that on their course request sheet. And then the counselors will be reaching out and providing those students with the necessary permission forms that she's about to show us. If you didn't indicate that, then you will want to go back and let your counselor at your counselor at your high school. So don't everybody tell me that. Your counselor at your high school that this is what you want to do, and then he or she will give you that permission form.
Next slide. Okay. So the permission form, this is actually what the permission form will look like. Now, the first page, the front page is the only page that the student themselves would have to fill out. Now, as of this year, again, we talked about how we will only be doing one permission form for both the fall and the spring. So the student, if they are, for instance, they're interested in taking English 1301 in the fall, they would complete that and it would read as such fall 2022. And then they would select that they plan on taking English 1302 for the spring, which is 2023. Now, if they so choose not to take a class, that's perfectly fine. They don't have to do anything. This permission form will just be on file in the event that they decide that they want to take the class. They could take English 1301 and decide at some point that they don't want to do 1302. And that's perfectly fine. As long as we have the approval through the permission form, then that's fine. They don't have to do anything if they decide not to do it, but they have to have it in order to do it, if that makes sense. So for the campus-wide ID number, that campus-wide ID number will be their Collin ID number that they will receive after they have applied and after they have been emailed their login credentials and their Collin ID number. Please do not put your high school ID number on your permission form. That is not the Collin-wide ID number. We have to go back and try to figure out what your ID number is. If you have not completed your application, please do not fill out the permission form until you have done so, because you wouldn't even have your Collin-wide ID number to be able to place on your permission form. So definitely go ahead and get your application started so that once you receive your credentials and once they provide instructions on how to move forward with the permission form, you'll already be set and you'll have your Collin-wide ID number ready and available to go ahead and get your permission form taken care of. Okay, and you want to make sure that your parents sign off on your permission form and you'll be all set. Okay. Alrighty, so the back page is actually the page for the counselors. The counselors will simply go on there and they will work with the student to determine what classes the student will take. If students have taken the PSAT and they have met the score requirement for the TSI, the PSAT is one of those waivers that I spoke about earlier. Then the counselors can provide that information on the permission form, and then the student will be good to go, and I can enter those scores into the Collin system for the student, and they won't have to worry about that TSI process. Okay, and then the counselor will sign off on it and they'll provide me the back page of the permission form. Okay. So again, the permission form is not registering for your class. That's simply getting permission to take the class. Do not forget that once you submit your permission form, you still have to register for your class in your CougarWeb account. We will provide the course numbers for that. We have not yet rolled that out yet, but once the course numbers are up and running, then we will provide the students with the appropriate course numbers for their classes that they plan to take. Now, fall registration opens April 12th. So with that being said, students want to have all of those checklist items, all of those holds cleared prior to April 12th. My recommendation is that the students go ahead and apply and have all of those holds, if possible, cleared by the end of February, if possible. Certainly the big first or second week in March. Students definitely want to go ahead and get that taken care of as soon as possible, because you don't want to have holds preventing you from being able to register. Now, spring registration opens in late October, but again, that's forthcoming. We want to focus now on the fall registration, which opens April 12th. So I encourage students to try to go ahead and get registered as soon as registration opens. The deadline is May 1st. The deadline to register for dual credit classes is May 1st. So the student have to have registered and paid for their class for the fall by May 1st. Okay. Now the Texas Success Initiative exam is the TSI that I spoke of earlier. This is simply that placement exam that students have to have in order to be able to take those college classes. So if you go to the next slide here, I'll just show you all how it works. So for TSI exemptions, now there are exemptions that students can have if your student has taken the SAT or if the student has taken the ACT. For the SAT, there is no combined score needed. So for instance, the student does not have to have like a composite score for the SAT. If the student has at least a 480 on the evidence-based reading and writing portion of the SAT, then that would exempt them from having to take the reading and writing portion if they were wanting to take a history or an English class for dual credit. This is very important. As far as the math, the student would have to have at least a 530 on the SAT in order to be exempt from taking the TSI altogether if they are interested in taking a math or a science dual credit class. Okay, now sometimes what I see is that if a student decided to do history or English in the fall and then they circle back around in the spring and say, okay, well now I'm going to do a math, just know in the fall, it only required them to have that reading writing score for their history and their English. But if they decide to come back and say, I'm going to do a math, just know that they have to provide a math score. They don't have to provide math and reading and writing if they only plan on taking one or the other. But if they plan on doing all of them, then they will have to provide those appropriate scores. Now for the ACT, there is a composite for that one, and the composite score for that is a 23. And the English, they would need at least a 19 on that part, and the math, they would need at least a 19 as well. But again, we do allow the partial exemptions for students. And when I say partial exemptions, that simply means that it's not where the student has to provide both the reading and writing and math if they only plan on taking, say, history or English or math or science. Okay. All righty. So on to the next slide.
Sorry, I'm cutting in again, Crystal.
Okay, sure.
If your child is a junior right now, an 11th grader, who is, if your child is a junior right now, they will be taking an SAT on March 23rd here at their high school campus, at their senior high campus. I highly recommend, if they're planning to take dual credit, that they have that SAT score sent to Collin College. The SAT is free and they can have the score sent to Collin for free. A lot of our students will meet their exemption through that SAT. Not all, but a lot of them do. So that's something that I recommend. If your child is currently an 11th grader looking to take dual credit and you're concerned about TSI, have them list Collin as one of their colleges when they take that March 23rd SAT. And for a lot of those kids, it'll take care of the TSI exemption for them. Otherwise, we're going to have some more information later about exactly when your student can take the TSI.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And if they did not list it, they can always go into their College Board account and request to have that be sent over to Collin. But as Ms. James stated, I would recommend that they go ahead and just go off the bat, just go ahead and put that on there so that those scores could automatically be sent right on over. Because sometimes, and that is very important, because those scores typically take a while, about 2 weeks or so, for Collin to receive them and get them processed. So that process can hold things up as well. So I would encourage students absolutely to go ahead and get those scores sent over as soon as they get ready to take that exam. Okay. And again, we do need those official scores. So it can't be where the student logs into their College Board account and they are able to see their scores and then they send a screenshot or something like that. Unfortunately, we aren't able to accept the scores that way. They would have to have those official scores be sent to the college the same way that they would if they were applying to any other university. Okay. Now the TSI waivers. So the waivers are different. The exemptions simply mean that for the SAT and the ACT, once the student graduates, they are good to go. They don't have to put anything, they don't have to do anything else to their account if they decide to go to Collin. Now for the waiver, the way that this works is if a student has taken the PSAT and they decide to take a history or English class, they only have to have at least a 460 on the PSAT. For the math, they only have to have at least a 510 for a math or science level course. For the STAR, if the student has taken English 2, if they scored at least a 4,000 on the STAR exam, then that would also waive them out from having to take the reading or the history or the English portion of the TSI. I'm sorry, if they were registering for a history or English class, then they wouldn't have to worry about the English. That would be sufficient. Now for the Algebra 1, if they have at least a 4,000 and at least a final grade of a 70% in Algebra 2, that would also waive them from the math portion for the math and or science that they may choose to take. For the ACT, I rarely get students that have taken the ACT Aspire, but if there are some out there that decide to take that, the English 435 on the English would waive them out for that history and English, and then a score of a 431 would waive them out on the math part for the math or science that they may choose to take. Okay.
So where I said before, I talked about 11th graders, and the 11th graders are going to be taking an SAT on their senior high campus on March 23rd. If your child is currently a 10th grader, these are excellent options for pursuing a TSI waiver. And again, several of you have asked about this. I haven't answered in the chat because I knew this was coming. So if I'm seemingly ignoring your question, it's partly because I know the answer is coming. So if you have a current 10th grader, the PSAT or the STAR could be their way to get that TSI waiver. You can always reach out to your individual counselor to find out exactly what those scores are for your student if you don't know. You can also log into Parent Portal and see your child's standardized test scores as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So next slide. Okay, so we talked about the waivers. And so for the waiver, the PSAT that we mentioned, the counselor could simply put that PSAT score on the back of the form and they're all set. But for those exemptions such as the SAT, the ACT, that must come directly from College Board. Okay. Okay. So if a student did not meet the proficiency level that was necessary on the SAT, the ACT, the PSAT, the STAR, and at that point, if they're asking, okay, what are my other options? Your other option is to take the actual TSI exam. You could simply take the exam and see how well you score there. If you meet the proficiency level on the TSI for the subject that you're interested in taking, then you can take your dual credit class. So these are the steps to do so. If a student has to take the TSI, if they did not meet the PSAT score requirement, if they did not meet the SAT, the ACT or STAR requirement, then they could simply go and try to take the TSI to see how well they score there to see if they'll be able to take the class. Now they must complete a pre-assessment first. And once they do that, then they'll be able to go ahead and reach out to our testing center over at the campus. Any of our Collin campuses, they could go to any of our testing centers at any campus and take the TSI exam. Now that exam is not timed. They can take all the time that they need to take that exam. The exam is also computer-based, so it's not where they're sitting in a cold room, like circling answers all day. They have to pay $29 for the exam, the TSI. There is a fee of $29 for that, and they could simply either pay that to the cashier's office or they could do it online. They also have the option of doing it over the phone. And so the students would they'd call over to the testing center, they'd set up that in-person testing, and they would just go over, take the exam, and basically from there, I'll be able to see the score. They don't even necessarily have to bring the form back to me because I'll be able to, at that point, see the score. Because it's computer-based, the scores are automatically loaded into our Collin system. So I'll be able to go into their account and immediately see what their scores were to see if they were eligible beyond the exam to take their classes. And so for other information regarding that, we do have on our webpage information about taking the TSI and how that works and all of that. Okay. The next slide. So I'm told that the high school will also be hosting the TSI, and below are the TSI dates for Clark, Vines, and Plano Senior. So the exam will be administered at the high school on these days, and the students can contact their counselor for sign-up information. So if you look at Clark, they will be hosting the TSI on Saturday, February 26th at 8 p.m., Saturday, March 19th at 8 p.m., and Saturday, April 9th at 8 p.m. For Vines, they will be hosting on Friday, February 25th at 8:45 a.m. and Saturday, March 19th at 8:30 a.m. And I want to apologize there. I noticed that for Clark, we have 8 p.m. on Saturday. That's actually going to be 8 a.m. And same for March 19th. And also for Plano Senior, their dates are Saturday, March 19th and Saturday, April 30th. But again, if you have any other questions regarding that, you could simply reach out to your counselor and they will provide you with more information regarding that. Okay. Now, the bacterial meningitis vaccination, this is a hold that would auto-populate onto the student's account. Now, all dual credit students that are taking any Collin class at a Collin campus typically have to have this vaccination. However, our dual credit students are very privileged to be able to take all of their classes on their high school campus, which is such a major plus. As a result of that, we are able to waive out the vaccination requirement for the students because they're on the high school campus. And there are some students in other districts who may go to the campus to take their classes because the district may not necessarily host that class on their high school campus. So this slide is applicable to those students who would have to go to the Collin campus. But again, we are very fortunate to have all of our classes housed at the high school. And so I'll just simply place that waiver on the student account and they'll be all set because they'll be taking their classes at the high school and not at the Collin campus. Now, we certainly encourage if the student wants to go ahead and provide us with that bacterial meningitis vaccination, they can do so, especially if the student feel strongly that they'll continue on at Collin beyond dual credit. We could go ahead and put that on file and that record will be good to go because the record is good for 5 years. And as long as they have had the shot within the last 5 years, then they will need that once they decide to go to Collin, if they decide to continue on over at Collin. And they would have to have it so that when they begin their classes, the state requires that any student that's under the age of 22, they must have that vaccination on file. So again, students are more than happy to go ahead and submit it and I can process it and send it over to admissions. We will put that in their student account. But for students that they plan on just taking those dual credit classes at the high school, that's not necessarily a requirement because we are able to put that waiver on their account because they'll be taking their classes at the high school. Okay. Alrighty, so for the mandatory campus safety training, this training is completed in their CougarWeb account and students are able to go in there and see what their holds are that are remaining. So their checklist items, if they have 2 checklist items, they'll be able to see what those checklist items are. Because if you look down a little bit, the second little link to the last where it says view my holds, in the student's CougarWeb account, they would simply be able to go in there, click the student tab and view their holds on their account. So they'll know exactly where they stand, what checklist items they need to complete in order to be able to register for their classes. If they ever have any questions, they can always reach out to me and I'm more than happy to kind of walk them through which holds they may have on their account. But if they just want a quick glance to go ahead and get it squared away, they can simply go into their own account and check their holds from their account. But the mandatory campus safety training is also a training that's required by the state. Simply a video that the student would go in their account and watch. They have to go ahead and get it completed. Once they complete that video, the hold will automatically be lifted from their account. They won't have to submit anything, any type of documentation saying that they've completed the video. The hold will automatically be lifted from the account. Okay. All right. So again, how do I check for my holds on my account? The student would go into their CougarWeb account. They would, once they log in, they would just simply click that student tab and they can go in there and check their holds. They would click my profile. And as you see at the bottom, it will show that they have no holds remaining. Okay. Now, this is a holds resolution guide that they do have on the Collin website. The students are able to access to get instructions if they are needing to complete any of those holds. I'll be also providing instructions on how to get holds completed on the student accounts. Historically, I have emailed students when they have holds remaining on their account and it's approaching the deadline. I'll send them instructions on how to get those completed so that they could go ahead and knock it on out to get registered for their classes. Okay. So if you guys look, we talked about, I'm sorry, would you go back to the other one here, the other slide? Okay, so for that, we talked about the high school permission form, and then that social security number hold is a hold that will auto-populate back onto the account if the student does not list their social on their application, which is why I mentioned earlier about the importance of putting that social on the application. Please make sure that you do that so that you will not get that hold on your account. Again, for the immunization proof, that hold is going to be on the student's account, but I will waive it out. So once the hold is on there, then I'll take care of that hold. If a student still has an immunization hold at some point and it hasn't been lifted, they could absolutely reach out to me and I'll make sure that it gets taken care of. And so the only other things that would be within the students that the students would need to take care of would be, of course, that TSI assessment. And that's pretty much it, aside from that training that they'll need to complete in their CougarWeb account. Okay. And at that point, they're ready to register. And I know it sounded, I mean, that probably sounded like that was so easy, but I know you guys are probably thinking this is a lot of steps. But rest assured that I am here to answer any questions and help you guys along the process to try to make it as seamless as possible for you. Now, the registration instructions are, they would simply log into their Collin portal, their CougarWeb account, and they would go into click the registration and planning tab. Once they click that, they would go to add, drop, or withdraw class, and they'll click there. Once they click that information, they'll enter credit fall 2022, and that's this. There'll be a drop down box, and they simply select that term, and then they will click enter CRN. So it is very important that if you look at the bottom where it says enter CRN, they want to click that tab. We're not going to find classes, because if they click find classes and try to go in there and enter that course number, it's not going to work. So they want to enter the CRN that we will be providing to them. Each student will be provided their individual CRNs to be able to register for their classes. And so they would go in there, they would simply enter their own CRN, and that's how they would register. Once they do that, they would click add to summary at the bottom of the screen, and then they'll click submit, and they are registered for their classes. Okay. And once they register, at that point, they will pay for their classes. And so to do that, if you could go to the next slide here. So once they go into their account to pay for their classes, they would go to CougarWeb to pay. So there is a link right underneath the student tab that says Cougar Pay, and they would just click Cougar Pay. They would go in there, it would show them their balance after they have registered for their class, and they would just simply go in there and make the payment. Now, again, we talked about the tuition earlier and kind of outlined what that cost factor looks like for our students. Now, if you look at our tuition, it's roughly $57 per credit hour. Each class is 3 credit hours. And so that totals to roughly $171, $173, somewhere in there for one class. And again, for some of the out-of-county classes, that would be 103 per credit hour and 311 for a 3-credit-hour course. And again, that's not necessarily applicable to our students because our students are in Collin County. Okay. That tuition, I also want to note, tuition is paid every semester. So the student will register and pay in the fall, and the student would also have to register and pay in the spring. Okay. They will register and pay in the fall, and then they would have to register and pay again in the spring. They will not have to get a new permission form because that permission form is good for the entire year, but they must register and pay every single semester. Okay. All righty. So we've already outlined those payment instructions where they would just go in there and go to Cougar Pay and make the payment. Okay. All right, so in terms of resources that we have available to our students for dual credit, we'll go to the next slide here. Okay, now our students have so many dual credit benefits. We have just a lot of resources available to our students. And so if you want to go to the next slide, the students can go to the dual credit homepage, and you all can go in there and just kind of read through the dual credit information. I want to note what's very important is that a lot of times parents and students, they may go onto the Collin page and they may see deadlines that are not in sync with the ISD's deadlines. I want to be clear that Collin has their own deadlines, but ISDs have their own guidelines and deadlines that they have set forth that the students must adhere to. And typically those deadlines may be before or after, but certainly the students want to follow the ISD's guidelines. That is very important. So whatever the ISD sets forth, whatever the high school says, that's what the high school says. I know I've had experiences where students the ISD may say that a deadline is, say, May 1st, but for the student would call over to Collin and they may say that their deadline may be May 12th. Well, that's applicable to students who are taking their classes over at Collin. That's for general population Collin College students, not necessarily for dual credit students who have to adhere to those Plano ISD deadlines. So I just want to be clear there in case you guys may see conflicting dates or information out there. You certainly want to make sure that you are following the information that Plano ISD has out there. Okay. Now, what does Access do? Access is simply that's our disabilities department that we have as a resource to any of our students who may need academic accommodations or students who may have a 504 plan or an IEP in place on the high school side. I want to be clear that counselors, this process is totally different. The Access process is different from the high school process. So it's not where, the counselor didn't make sure that the students Collin disability resources was in place. That's not how it works. The student must self-identify and they must complete a separate application. There's an Access application that the student must complete to Collin after they have applied to Collin. So the student must do the regular Collin application. And once they have gotten their CougarWeb ID number, at that point, they would also have to apply to the Access department separately in a separate application. They have to self-identify. Once they complete that application, then the department will reach out to them and they will set up an interview for the student to go and provide supporting documentation to show that they will need the accommodations. And from there, the department will determine what those accommodations will look like for the student. I know that on the high school side, sometimes high schools may have accommodations and modifications. I want to be clear that for our Access students, there are only accommodations. There are no modifications for Access students. And again, the department decides what that will look like. So it could be totally different from those accommodations could be totally different from what the accommodations what the students receive on the high school side. So that's very important. And there is a liaison specifically for our dual credit students, for our Access dual credit students to help make that transition easier for any students who may need the disability services. And so we do have that resource available to the students as well. Okay.
I just want to reiterate that if you have a student that receives accommodations either through 504 or through special education, they do not automatically just apply to these classes the way that you've been used to. That information has to be applied for separately through this access office. If that is you and you have questions, this is the kind of thing that you can reach out either to Crystal or to your counselor to kind of get some guidance on how to go about that. But your high school accommodations do not automatically apply to college classes.
Thank you. And so again, as I stated, the student would simply self-identify for those accommodations. They would apply separately for those services. They would go to the Collin website. They would type in Access Office or Disability Services, and that application will come up. And at that point, they would complete the access application, and then they will receive an email regarding the updated status on that, and then they would reach out for them to set up an interview. And from there, the student would provide that supporting documentation of his or her disability, and then the accommodations will be requested each semester for each professor, okay? And so we do have our access advisor available, but again, you guys could totally reach out to me and I'm more than happy to assist and provide that information to you all. Now, we do have our campus resources available to students. That includes our career services, fitness center, our library, math lab, student center, tutoring, writing centers, and so much more. These resources are available to all of our dual credit students at no additional cost to students. That to me is phenomenal. I mean, at that point, once the student becomes a dual credit student, they are considered a Collin student, and they now have access to all of the resources that any Collin student would have, which is incredible. Again, for career services, our fitness center, you can go and work out whenever you want to at any of our campuses, by the way. It's not just one campus. You're not limited to, say, the campus that's closest. You can literally go to any of our campuses because, again, you would have the access as any Collin student, okay? Now, the writing centers, the tutoring labs, math centers, again, it's a no-brainer. Our goal is to truly try to set our students up for success. And so, again, they have access to all of that, all of those resources. And the college and career counselor, myself, I am here to simply provide any type of dual credit support regarding the permission forms, assisting students with their holds on their account, processing any type of individual changes that the student have to make regarding their courses, and simply just communicating what the program is, the requirements that we have in place to be able to take those dual credit classes. Okay. Now, for students who need books, you have to buy books in college. So unfortunately, they're not free. The students will be responsible for their books, and they can purchase those books from the bookstore, but that is, I didn't say this, but it's not necessarily a requirement. They can go and find any type of price matching that's available in any other vendor that's a little cheaper. They are more than happy to explore other options that may be available and more feasible for the student and the parent. And so to purchase their books from the bookstore, they would just go into their CougarWeb account, click on their My Class Schedule, and under the student quick links, they would just go in there, adjust their registration term to the credit fall of 2022. And then they would simply click the title of the course and select the bookstore link, and they will be able to see the book that's needed. And then they will be able to just kind of do their due diligence and make an informed decision from there in terms of where they would like to purchase their books from. Okay. All righty, so the college ID and the parking sticker. Now, both of these resources are free for students. I highly encourage students to consider getting a college ID. They are absolutely free. They could simply go to any of our student engagement centers at any of our campuses, and they will receive their college ID and their parking sticker. Now, The resources that I mentioned earlier, such as the writing center, the math lab, the tutoring centers, the library, our fitness facility, career services, the student would be required to show their ID if they chose to use any of those resources. So whereas the ID is not mandatory, if they want to use any of those resources, it would be necessary for them to go ahead and get that college ID. The parking sticker is also one of those things where they don't have to have it, but it's highly encouraged in case the student decides that they want to go to the campus at any point to use any of those resources. It's just good to have because again, that parking sticker could help identify the student's car on campus, because with the parking sticker, they will be able to look into the system and find information on the student if they need to get in contact with them, if anything were to happen while the student was on campus. And so I just think it's really important to have that college ID and that parking sticker. And again, it's not required, but it is free, and you will have to have it in order to use any of the resources available to you on the campus. Okay. Now, the fall 2022 important date is, well, certainly you guys want to try to get those holds cleared. Again, my recommendation is no later than the end of March, because the registration does open April 12th. So if you guys could please do your due diligence and just go ahead and try to get those holds cleared as soon as you can. I mean, because again, some of those processes take a while. The application takes about a week. It takes about 2 weeks or so for your scores to get sent in and processed. So different things take time. And so you certainly want to go ahead and try to get those scores taken care of as soon as you can. The TSI, for students who have to take the TSI, in the event that you may not be successful the first time you test, you may want to test one more time just to see if you can get a proficient score to take dual credit. So you want to do all of that ahead of time while you have time. So I encourage you guys to go ahead and get that done. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if I can assist in any way to help get that process moving along, because there's nothing more frustrating than everyone just kind of dragging their feet and waiting to the last minute and then saying that they weren't aware of the deadline, or that they didn't know, or whatever the case is. If you're on this presentation, I just want to note that the registration and payment deadline is May 1st. So certainly take care of business. We want to see your diligence as you decide to move forward and take these college classes. Like, prove to us that you are ready and that you're willing to do what it takes to make sure you have everything in place to be successful. Okay. All righty. So that concludes our presentation. And I just want to thank you guys so much for joining tonight. And I hope that this information was beneficial as you guys go and again, make that informed decision in terms of whether or not dual credit is a good fit for you all. And I am here to answer any questions. I am Crystal Sanders, the college and career counselor for senior and their feeders, Vines and Clark. And these are my email addresses. I have my Collin email listed here, as well as my Plano ISD email. Feel free to use either. It does not matter, either is fine. And I will try to get back with you as soon as I can. I know that peak season is ramping up and I have quite a few schools, but trust me, I will absolutely try to get back to you as soon as possible. Okay.
Okay, there were a couple questions that I wanted to answer as a group because they got asked a few times. I wanted to make sure everyone heard the answer. One of the questions was, first off, thank you very much, Crystal. She worked here on the Plano Senior High campus. She's worked at the West campus as well, and she's going to be working directly with Vines and Clark. However, even if I know there are people in our meeting that are from the East cluster or the West cluster, they have someone that can work with them as well. And if you have a question and you want to email it to Crystal, she can direct that question to the appropriate person. So I do appreciate, I know we've got a little bit of everybody in here, even though we're representing Plano Senior High tonight. So I had the question about summer dual enrollment, and I'm going to answer this from the perspective of Plano Senior High. I've been looking to pursue opportunities for our students to take summer dual enrollment classes, and I just got this information like a couple hours ago, and we will be putting together information for students. Yes, you can take dual enrollment in the summer. It is going to require that the student the student will be taking those classes either, if you want to do summer dual enrollment, you would have to take that class at Collin College, or if there is an online option, you could take it online. But we will not be teaching summer dual enrollment classes on our campuses, but you can do that. You're going to have to reach out to your counselors at your school. Again, I just got this information for the Plano Senior Vines Clark cluster just a couple hours ago, because I know a lot of our students are interested, and I will have that available for those students. Reach out to if you're not one of a central cluster student, reach out to your campus to find out what they can help you with summer dual credit. That's not something that we did a lot of in the past, but there's been a lot of interest. And so we do want to help those students who may want to take some summer classes through Collin.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, and so with that being said, if there are any students that are interested in taking dual credit classes over the summer, that process, that holds process and that admissions application process that I spoke of must be done expeditiously, because yes, dual credit registration for the summer actually has a different registration opening, is actually March 7th. Mm-hmm. So registration for the summer opens March 7th, and different from the, it's totally different from the fall, because of course the fall isn't until August, but summer typically begins in May, June. And so students definitely want to go ahead and try to get that done as soon as possible. Reach out to me so that we can try to get those holes taken care of and identify what it is that you're wanting to take over on the campus. With that being said, as Ms. James said, if they're not having classes, hosting classes at the high schools, and typically they do not have dual credit classes during the summer at the high school.
I can tell you, we will not have dual credit classes over the summer at any of our campuses. But
right.
So if you want summer, you will be taking it either at a Collin location or doing their online. And I really want to stress that you talk to your counselor at your school about the summer, because the summer aspect is something that, each campus kind of has a different position on that. So yes, I can only speak for the central cluster about the summer.
Yes.
The other question that I got quite a bit is the days of the week that dual credit classes meet. So we're talking now about during the regular school year. Mm-hmm. And this also is going to vary depending on your campus. The student needs to be prepared for that class to be Monday through Friday. It often isn't, but it depends a lot on the master schedule on that campus and the staffing and all of that. So here at Plano Senior High, our Collin classes meet on a different schedule than they maybe meet at Plano West. Sometimes we share an instructor who comes here a few days and goes there a few days. So I can't tell you, do they always meet Monday through Friday, or is it Monday through Thursday or Tuesday? It can vary. The student needs to be prepared for any of the days that class can meet, and it's going to depend a lot on your campus as to what that looks like. During times when the class is not in session, then the students, that time is their own to use productively.
I just wanted to go back, Ms. James, and reiterate as far as the summer is concerned. For students who once they get with their counselor and determine that they're interested in taking those classes in the summer, those classes are not dual credit specific courses. That is I wanted to mention that's a general population course, meaning that class may be comprised of any of other Collin students. It won't just be dual credit students, high school students, like it would be at the high school campus. So I wanted to note that those are typically general population courses that are over at the campus when they decide to take those classes in the summer. And we do have, in the summer, we have different summer courses, summer sections, basically. That's the best way to sum it. So we have one section that may go from June to August. And then we have our summer ones just for the month of June, then summer two just for the month of July. And so we have different summer sessions available. And so again, the students can, if a student is interested in taking a summer course, after they have spoken with their counselor and they have determined whether or not it's going to be a good fit for them, then they could simply reach out to me and I can provide more instructions regarding the summer, but they would have to go ahead and get that ball rolling right now. For students who typically tend to travel in the summer, you might want to rethink that unless you are doing 1 month or the other, because again, you know, professors, they're not going to want to hear that, you know, oh, I was out of town for a week, what can I make up? I mean, the summer classes are very small. They're much smaller in length in terms of, you know, it's not a semester course. They only have a few weeks to capture all that information. And so it's a little different from a full-on semester course. And I also wanted to note that I see Dr. Lindsay Moore here. She's the Director of Collegiate Academy, and I wanted to thank her so much for joining tonight as well. She is the Director of Collegiate Academy for Collin College, and she serves as the liaison between all of the faculty and the professors and instructors. And Dr. Moore, I didn't know if you wanted to. I saw you, I didn't know if you were wanting to say something really quickly or not.
Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us. We're so excited to have your students potentially taking some dual credit classes with us at Collin. I'm also happy to answer questions that you have about any of the courses that we offer or anything like that. I also have in my past taught some dual credit classes at Plano West. So I'm very familiar with how all of that works, but welcome, and we're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Ms. James, I didn't know if you had anything else.
I again, thank you everyone for being here. We went a little over what I thought, but it was a ton of good information. I am going to, I'm going to go home now, but I'm going to work to have this uploaded onto our Plano Senior High School Counseling website so that you could go back and take a look at it. And again, I can't stress enough. I got some questions that were very student specific. Things like what would be a better fit, AP or dual. Your counselors at your high school are a valuable resource in a lot of the very specific advising that you may need to help you make these decisions. So please reach out to him or her. We gave you a lot of general information tonight, but if you have those kinds of questions, please talk to your high school counselor, and he or she can definitely help you out with that information. All right, I think we're going to stop it there. And as I said, I can't stress enough, please take the time to reach out to your counselors and they will be happy to help. Thank you again, Crystal, for hosting and providing all this for us.
Thank you, Ms. James. I appreciate you all.
Have a great night, everyone.
You too. Good night. Bye.